What is up, party people? It's your man DH. I'm coming back at you with another video. This is me documenting my journey dealing with sickle cell anemia. This is episode 2. So if you saw episode 1, I was kind of explaining, like my origins or my struggle, from the very beginning with it. And one thing I didn't mention that I will at least point out right now is basically the western part of Africa closest to the Atlantic Ocean. The Africans there were being bitten profusely by mosquitoes at such a high rate that the body tried to defend itself by mutating the blood cells. Because what happens is when you get malaria, the mosquitoes, they were getting malaria at such a high rate from those mosquitoes. What happens is your blood cells, regular blood cells, they rupture and burst open when they are contaminated with malaria. When you have a sickle cell, with it being so rough and rigid and only having 25% oxygen content, it can't rupture. I mean, it's 3/4 of the way gone already. So malaria, I don't even know can enter the cell, but even if it does enter, it cannot rupture it. So it was like the body's way of trying to defend itself from the viciousness of the mosquitoes at the time. You know what I mean? We're talking about 17th century and before. Anyway, some of the things that I've had to deal with in particular, like where do we start? The first thing I can really remember is about 1997 or 98. I was about 4 years old. I had these lesions all up and down my legs from the ankle to about midway up the leg. And what actually, they were these pus filled bumps. I mean, I couldn't even wear socks, you know what I mean? Or shorts or anything of that matter. And we didn't know what it had, like what caused it. We found out later that basically when I had gotten some blood in a blood transfusion, I had a reaction to the blood that caused those lesions that were on my legs. So what ended up happening, I ended up getting an infection in my left leg. It was in the bone. It's called osteomyelitis. Look it up if you've never seen, if you don't know what that is, if you've never heard of it. Osteomyelitis. Uh, from what I remember, I don't remember it being painful in particular, but it was in my left leg, and I mean, from the knee down to the ankle, really. It was an infection in my bone. Usually people have to get their legs amputated or their arms or whatever when they have it. So I ended up having to get this thing called a PICC line, which look that up too. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes for a nurse to place sometimes. And I had to get this medicine called vancomycin. Now, osteomyelitis, like I said, it's an infection in the bone. It's the precise reason why people who have sickle cell cannot have reptiles. Because as you know, reptiles, in particular lizards, they secrete salmonella on their skin, right? That salmonella, not ingested, but just in contact with when you have sickle cell, can cause you to have osteomyelitis, which is this dangerous, as you've heard me explain. So that's like the first thing I can really remember. So the lesions, once they cleared up, it left these spots all over my legs. And so, it made me self-conscious about wearing shorts and, things about that, like things in that nature. Yeah. So anyway, fast forwarding, frequent crises in and out of the hospital, missing, weeks and months of school, and, not being able to play sports and do stuff with my friends, not being able to go outside when it's too cold because of the constricting of the blood vessels might trigger a crisis. Not being able to go out when it's too hot because the dehydration will do the same thing. I mean, it's a very temperamental, tricky disease. And so the next thing I can really remember was, so I live in Missouri now, and the hospital I was at, I had one doctor, and at the time I was in my early teens, and I remember my mom asking the doctor, why did I had a limp, and my mom was like, why is he limping? They told her it was because I was going through a growth spurt. A new doctor came in, and the first appointment I had with her, her name was Dr. Chambers. She came all the way from Florida here to Missouri for whatever reason. And, because see, hematology and oncology are a thing together. But hematology is, the study of blood, and oncology is the same thing but cancer. Somehow they get combined as to one thing, and usually sickle cell gets swept under the rug in lieu of cancer. And I'm not saying that cancer is not bad. Actually, I lost my father to pancreatic cancer. So it's not me like saying it's not something to deal with, but stop clumping us together and blatantly treating the cancer patients better than you treat us. I'm sick of that. So the doctor, she sees me limping. First appointment I had with her. What's wrong with him? Why is he limping? My mom tells them what the previous doctor had told her. She said, no, something's not right. MRI. Scheduled an MRI that day. Like, go downstairs now. Went downstairs, had the MRI come back up. She's looking at the results. You have avascular necrosis. Or tells my mom he has avascular necrosis. What's avascular necrosis? Man, avascular necrosis basically means it literally that, avascular. You know what I mean? So something in the body where it's not directly affected by blood flow from the veins is dying, because necrosis means death, right? Or deterioration. Literally, my hip joints, like the ball of your hip joint that goes into the pelvis, was deteriorating, cracking, falling to pieces. Literally falling to pieces. To the point where at one point I could stand with my right leg completely straight and my whole left foot would come off the ground. You could swipe your hand under my left foot and not touch the bottom of my shoe or the ground. That's how big of a difference there was at one point. Limp was huge. That ended up getting me confined to a wheelchair until they figured out what we were going to do. Well, if I stay confined in the wheelchair, then you gain weight, and then that's not good for the hip. But the hip is in such bad condition, you can't really walk. Like, it got to the point where the bone had to pop in and out of the pelvic joint just for me to move. So if I wanted to sit down and lean forward, I had to wait till I felt a pop before I could lean forward like this. Now, if I wanted to lean back, I had to wait until I felt that same pop. And sometimes it was very painful and it wouldn't do it, so I'd have to lean back forward. And then start slowly leaning back again. Still didn't feel it? Nope. Lean forward again. Go back, start it again. And I had to negotiate with it until I felt that pop. Same thing when I sat down. When I sat down, I had to lean forward so I could sit down at a table or what have you. Then when I stood up, I had to make sure I negotiated with it right, because I couldn't just stand straight up. If I did, I would have to be hunched over and walk, because I had to wait till I felt that pop. Literally. I'm not making any of that up. So we came to the conclusion that because the necrosis was so bad, it was either be confined to a wheelchair and never walk again. And mind you, I'm 13, going on 14 at that time. That either I'll never walk again that young, or you gotta have a hip replacement. A total hip replacement. Well, against my wishes, my parents basically were like, you gotta do this. So I had my left hip replaced in 2008. And then, because I had a vascular necrosis in both sides, I had my right hip replaced in 2010. Right hip never was that bad, but I had the surgery done willingly on that side before it could even get as bad as the left one, And so I had both of my hips replaced before I was 16 years old. I had 3 blood clots, 2 in the bend of my left arm in the exact same spot, 2 years apart, both in the same month too, January of 2013, January of 2015. And then the third one, which is the worst one, was in the main vein to my liver. And at the time, the only other documented case of that was somewhere on the other side of the world, and that person died. So we had to act aggressively. I had this pain in my stomach right here. I couldn't even move like this without it causing excruciating pain. And apparently the blood clot had been there for a few days. And I mean, my liver wasn't able to process stuff that I was doing as quickly. Medicine, taking medicine, eating food, whatever. And so had I not gotten that checked, we wouldn't be able to have this, heart to heart that we're having now in this video. So I had to be admitted to the hospital where I got this medicine every 12 hours injected into my stomach, alternating sides for 7 days straight, called Lovenox, to break up the blood clot. They did an MRI on the 7th day. Miraculously, it was gone. I had to take a blood thinner from that point on called warfarin, which sucked. Had to routinely get my blood checked to make sure it was at a certain level. I've since then been able to stop taking that medicine and haven't had a blood clot since 2015, knock on wood. But that's just a couple of the things that have happened, man. And that's not even the worst. The worst thing that has happened to me while dealing with sickle cell, beyond the pain, the pain, the avascular necrosis, the osteomyelitis, I'll take all of that over what is happening to me currently. Right now I'm dealing with venous stasis ulcers. And I'm not going to put a picture up, and ruin everybody's day and make you lose your breakfast, lunch, or dinner whenever you're watching this. But if you have a strong stomach and you want to go and look, be my guest. Google venous stasis ulcers. They sometimes happen to people. Who have diabetes as well. But with sickle cell, they're finding particularly it happens more often than not with beta zero thalassemia, the type I have, and more weight like 95 to 5% in men versus women, and they don't appear until after you turn 19, which is so weird. Because if there was somebody to have told me beforehand, look, man, basically what's happening is, you have the dermis, the epidermis, all these layers of your skin. Because the veins in the legs and feet are so much smaller than the ones in the middle of the body, the arms, and all that kind of thing, those sickle cells can't get through. And literally what's happening is the top layer of my skin is dying, then the next layer, then the next layer, then the next layer. And I'm ending up with ulcers, wounds, literal wounds, open wounds on my legs that sometimes vary in size from this big to this big. And that's not even an exaggeration. And I have to dress them, and I have to clean them, and I have to wrap them up before I get in the shower. I can't lay on my left or right when I'm sleeping. It's either on my back or my stomach. I can't get in the swimming pool. Like, there's so many things that have happened because of that. And the hip surgeries did nothing but worsen the situation, because if the ulcers were going to happen anyway, which none of us know, but you have something called the lymphatic system, which is the system that helps you bring water from your feet and your legs back up to your bladder. Because you drink water, and gravity pulls it down, and so this system, the lymphatic system, helps it go back up to your bladder so you can get it off, right? Well, when you have any lower body surgery, foot, ankle, leg, knee, hip, you have to cut through that. That is damaged when the surgery happens. So my first hip replacement, the left one, in 2008, I had a hematoma, which means there was a blood clot that formed on top. So I've had 4 blood clots, actually. I didn't even think about this one, but I had a hematoma, a blood clot, literally sitting in between one layer of tissue and the hip replacement. So they had to cut me back open 2 weeks after the initial surgery to clean that out and then restitch me. And now I'm here, And this ulcer thing, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, man. The pain that this causes is unlike anything I've ever felt in my life. And it's made me bitter. It's made me depressed. It's made me angry. You know, there's been times where I'm just depressed in the corner. I had to go to therapy. You know what I mean? Because there was times where I thought I would be better off if I just wasn't here. You know what I mean? That's the kind of psychological. Sickle cell is not just physical; it's psychological. That's the kind of stuff that it does to you. You know. So if there's anybody watching this that has sickle cell, just know you are not by yourself. We all rowing together. You know. If anybody watches this and you feel some kind of emotion or you understand what I'm saying, comment. Tell me about your struggle. Hit me up on Twitter, D__H___. Hit me on Facebook, Donnie Harden Jr. There's a sickle cell group. I'd love to add you to. We could all talk about it. You know what I mean? And for people who are watching that don't have it, hopefully I provided some type of insight. You know? So if you meet somebody with sickle cell, man, don't treat us differently because our minds still work. Just ask how we doing. You know what I mean? Because you never know. And so I know this video was longer, but I just wanted to tell you guys like everything that I've gone through and what I've had to deal with in my experience. And then when I go Monday, that'll be the first video of me documenting, you know, me getting stuck IV, getting the fluids and all that stuff. But, you know, this video is about to be 17 minutes, so I just wanted to say that, you know, like, subscribe, share, you know, please get active in the comment section. You know what I mean? Let me know what you think. Do you know anybody with sickle cell? Do you have it yourself? You know, talk to me. I'd love to get a dialogue going. You know what I mean? Because there needs to be more awareness about sickle cell. It does. But that's my spiel on that. Love. Go.